We are here with Larry Gioia, a individual who defies definition. But what I can say is that he is simultaneously a business owner, founder, senior consultant in the digital division, digital product innovation division of PwC, one of the global leading consulting firms, family man, XYZ. We could go on for about a couple of paragraphs on introducing him. But the main thing that we're going to focus on in this talk is his thought leadership around connection and community and how those ideas apply to our work lives. So over to you, Larry. How do you think about connection community as applied to our working careers, etc.?
Yeah, Alex, it's so good to see you, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. And for our global community that we're talking to today, it's good to see everybody virtually. Yeah, so I think everyone can relate to this, in as much as that if you are an introvert, you're an extrovert, no matter where you come from, we can all relate to being human, and no matter what your line of work is. And the fabric of being human comes to our desire, our very just interest of being tribal animals. And in that tribal nature of who we are, we crave connection. And the times we're living in right now, we're all living through it, is that connection seems to be lost a bit. And so I've been thinking about this for a long time, both in my work as a consultant and advising Fortune 1000 companies, but also my personal life. And so what I want to talk about today and with you, Alex, is about how do we bring that connection to everything that we do? And not just think about it as a silo of I've got connections in my personal life, I've got connections in my work life, and those are people, right? So we're talking about connections of people. I want to take it one step further and talk about connection of the world. Everything that we live through is connected somehow. Da Vinci said it himself, and maybe we'll talk about that. But everything's connected somehow, and I'm going to challenge us today to think about how do we truly connect at the speed of life in a very real, human, authentic way to bring out the best in ourselves and our people and our organizations. So I look forward to talking today.
Okay, so let's start. So the thing is, you've been coming at this from a couple of different angles, as you referred to the high-end corporate community building and the smaller scale startup community building. Not to mention, friends and relationships, but let's start with something probably more appropriate for the audience, which is smaller scale work grade community building. How are you approaching that and thinking about it?
Yeah, so look, we've got a lot of community builders who are listening in today. I think that the underpinning of community unto itself is finding the common thread to which we can all relate. So here we are talking about attending a biohacking summit virtually from around the world. There's clearly got to be this interest area, call it a topic, call it whatever it is. That's nice, but as call it founders, as instigators, as conveners, like we all are, Alex, as you and your leadership team are, is how do we bring those people together? And bringing us together is not about just picking up the phone and calling people, hey, I want to have you be a part of my community, but putting something out into the world that is attractive so that we can relate to it on a very human level. I'll talk about that in a very real way. So it's nice to have a topic that I relate to and I want to be a part of a community, but we want those people to be a part of a community and actually, dare I say, add value versus kind of lurking. And so as I think about building community and the communities that I've built and continue to think about, is how do we incite people to be a part of community so that they're not just a part of it, but they live it. They live it every single day. They talk about it themselves. They invite others. It becomes organic. And to do that is a couple of things I've learned. I think many of our listeners will appreciate this. It's about letting it be organic, and that community to be organic versus say top down, define it, here's the structure. I found the best communities are those that are truly self-forming, those that let themselves run their course, and we let people be people versus saying, here's what I want you to talk about, here's the way I want you to interact, here's the way I want you to engage. I think you've done a great job of that with this community, right? Letting people come as they are, listen, contribute, and be their own evangelist. So that's how it's worked for me. I find that, Alex, at the smallest scale, and then when we scale to larger, obviously, communities and then organizations, allows us as leaders to really build those communities inside of our workplace, right? And I found that to be something that has transcended time, but it's worked very well for me personally. I'm looking forward to talking more about that.
Okay, so in your answer there, you shifted from the smaller scale communities to the larger scale ones. In both cases, you're saying that it's, like you found that the most powerful or the strongest communities are self-forming. How do you set the conditions to allow that? What are the kind of pillars or the foundations for that? Yeah.
So some of the things I found that work so well. So usually as, let's say, as thinkers, as founders, as, conveners, instigators, whatever you want to use to describe ourselves. Connectors. Yeah, exactly. We want to put forth a framework because it's, say our idea, we want to bring people into us, right? And it's kind of this pull model. Some of the things I find that work best are not necessarily a push, but putting ideas out there, concepts, and letting people gravitate towards it on their own terms is really important. I say that because when we put a community out there in terms of like we have a seedling of an idea and want people to be a part of it, and we're pulling people into it, it's nice to have that foundation. But one of the pillars is letting it take its course naturally, because I can tell you communities I've started have completely pivoted away from what the original intent was. I'll give you a couple examples of that perhaps. And letting it run its course. And what I've found as a connector community builder is that's like the evolution of people, right? People will want to come to a place where they feel welcome, where they feel like they can connect with other people on a very human level, but they can relate to people. So the first pillar is really around let it take its course naturally. Be prepared to pivot, just as we would do with any, obviously, business endeavor. That's kind of number one. Number two is I think there is an over-indexing on administration. And I don't mean like administering forums and administering and policing. The best communities that I've found are, how do I say, self-policing, in as much as people will weed themselves out if they're kind of going against the grain or the ethos of the community. I think administration, so to speak, we should remove that from our own vernacular when it comes to building community. That's kind of number two. Let it police itself, and goes hand in glove with self-forming. The third of which, to me, is around continuing to stoke the community fire. And what I mean by that is yes, let it run its course, let it kind of percolate, but as kind of founders, as conveners, throwing new things into the mix every once in a while to stir the pot a bit, and in a good way, new thinking, new ideas, having these kinds of conversations just to get things interesting, keep them moving, and get people to think differently. I'm a huge fan of this diversity of thought, as I know you are as well, Alex.
Okay, so let's switch gears. We'll come back to the community techniques, because I really wanted to ask you to share a little bit about the Leonardo da Vinci kind of catalyst that you have. What's the story there?
Well, I mean, so look, Da Vinci is hopefully not anybody, foreign to anybody here in terms of his thinking. I've just been fascinated by his thinking, not just as an engineer, as a philosopher, as all the things that he was, and continues to be, and influencing our lives. At the end of the day, there's a very specific quote, and it's very specific in his writings that has really stuck with me over the years. And it's truly become a foundation to what I talk about. And it's very simple. And it's really the principles for the development of a complete mind. And it's very simple. And it goes like this. It's study the science of art, study the art of science, develop your senses, especially learn how to see, realize that everything connects to everything else. And it's so simple, right? It's so simple, but then I look back at everything's connected. Okay, yes, we as people are connected, but when you look at what Da Vinci's work was all about, is true polymath, right? How did he see things that others couldn't see? I have a sneaking suspicion he probably did a whole lot more listening than he did talking. I have a suspicion that, clearly a savant in his own right in terms of kind of how he thought about things, but had a very unique way of approaching problems. Not so much with obviously a solution in mind, but really listening, and what I would say is probably empathizing with people around him. And so this idea of introducing empathy and introducing truly listening, and I mean truly listening, just as you are, to tease out what the root of the problem actually is. Excuse me. becomes the basis of connecting dots. And Da Vinci does that, I think, better than anybody. It has been the foundation of my own thinking on this, and continues to be a catalyst. There's so much reading to be done there, not just his own writings, but that what has been written about him. So I use that as a through line of everything that I talk about, or connect it back to him in some way or form or fashion.
Yeah, and one of your maxims, or your main maxim, is always be connecting the dots. Okay,
that's it.
That applies to human relationships as well as like conceptual connections.
That's right. That's exactly right. This little maxim of a very simple acronym, and how can you forget this, right? ABCD. Always be connecting the dots, and it truly has become a maxim for me, for my teams. Whether they adopt it or not, it's completely up to them. But it's very simple. It is that it's all connected, and when whether we call ourselves connectors or not, when we take a mindset, and it's truly a mindset, we take a mindset of something that either before us or is forthcoming. When we think about that connection point and think about how they are interrelated, or frankly, what's not yet related, that's where innovation happens. That's where obviously curiosity is unlocked. And then when we build that into community and we empower community members and people of our tribes, right, of this tribe, to think about connection through always be connecting the dots, I think, and I've seen it, a lot of magic can actually happen. It's pretty fascinating.
Well, okay, that's a perfect segue onto the magic. So can you give us a couple of examples of your favorite cases, both from the corporate world and from the side hustle world or entrepreneurial world?
Yeah, so let's make this very real and in the moment here, Alex. I mean, you and I have known each other for probably all of maybe a few weeks now, right? And as much as we were connected through one of our very mutual friends, I presume, one of my very dear friends who's also speaking as a part of this summit, Hassan Osman, there's connection happening in real time. And what I mean by that is Hassan definitely lives the ABCD mindset, okay? In as much as you clearly invited him to be a part of this summit and give some talks, presumably you had asked him for some other people. But Hassan, I very much believe so, thought about it much differently than, hey, I know somebody who knows something about a topic. More so than probably, I presume he's thinking about this to say, hey, there's this Larry guy who I know from graduate school who has a perspective, but he's probably going to connect you to other people. And I think that's part of this, is the connection happening in real time here. So there's one example of how I even became opportunity to come with you and have this conversation today. Very real. Look, part of what I think, and I'll kind of connect this to my work in the enterprise, and we can get on the fact of what does social media mean and how do we leverage social to be social. I will tell you that there's so much happening, especially in the world we're living in right now, where how do we connect? How do we develop business? How do we develop true relationships in a very human way when we can't see them face to face? It's beautiful that we can be on calls together like this. But how do I actually create connections with people who I would ideally like to be clients, or I would like to create a true relationship with? Coming back to social, I cannot even begin to tell you and our listeners how much I've leveraged social, LinkedIn, Twitter, specifically, communities unto themselves, right? And finding niche communities in healthcare, where I do a lot of my work, and not just seeking out people to connect with to be clients, but to truly form relationships with, in the event that when they might need something, or in the event they would like a perspective and a point of view. I know this guy named Larry who happens to lead digital product innovation for PwC. I remember him from Twitter. I share that with you as the basis of that has come to life in the past 4 months, but the past 15 years of my life. Let's not underestimate the power of social when it comes to, I don't want to say business development, but connection of tribes. I cannot impress upon us enough. Yeah, we're all doing it, but I encourage us to think about how are you doing that to build business, to build your own brand, and what that looks like. And how are you showing up? How are you showing up in the digital world? And then we bring that into a very personal, human, digital context as we are today.
Okay. So those examples are very relevant for general career development, even outward facing. What about internally? Like what kind of, how are you applying these principles inside a high performance organization with the clients or the teams there?
Yeah. Yeah. So let me give you an example within PwC. And this, I think people can relate to this, even if you're not in a very large organization. So we ourselves have been going through our own transformation. Every organization, in light of what we're living through right now, is obviously transforming the way that we work. That goes without saying. About 3 years ago, we were very, very intentional, recognizing excuse me, the direction of travel for where the way the world is going. That we need to continue to empower our people, but more specifically, let our people be the catalyst for what's next for the firm of PwC. What I mean by that is we're talking about citizen-led innovation. Perhaps maybe not that new to many of us in this community, but citizen-led innovation is what's next. I'm not talking about the next big idea. Giving our people the tools, the technologies, the capabilities that they need to actually create the next thing that we can't see. What dare I say, empowering people to be the next Da Vinci at PwC. We've done that for the past 3 years in earnest, and really leaning in heavily and really investing. And I'm not talking about just upskilling. Okay, we've talked about that. We know all about that. This is really about truly empowering our people. And I'm not talking 20% time. There's that, of course. I'm talking about taking what you have built and thought of inside of a monstrosity that is PwC. Take that to your clients. Maybe it's not a service offering today. Maybe it's not something that we sell or deliver today. Go experiment with it. Empowering our people to experiment, try new things that would otherwise kind of break the mold of a 100-plus-year-old organization. That has become the fabric of the culture of what I would say is no longer our grandfather's PwC. And no matter where you're sitting in the world right now, you've heard of this firm, PricewaterhouseCoopers. We're not the firm that we used to be. And now here we are building products, delivering software solutions, and really what I would say is not hiring the same people we used to hire. That was all, I would say, fundamental to how we have built community inside of PwC and extending that community now out to the outside world in a very real, pragmatic, and thoughtful way.
Nice. And I'm hearing echoes of what John Hagel was saying in his session, which, he's the founder of the Deloitte Center for the Edge, I guess a major competitor for PwC in terms of corporation. And one of his most powerful ideas was about assembling or taking the initiative to assemble a small team with the intention of looking at unseen opportunities and problems and having a dedicated session for that. And this is something which applies to everyone listening, no matter what level of corporate existence you have. And then what you're saying is that PwC has built into the fabric that kind of thought, contemplation, and then the ability the autonomy to go out and experiment with, opening conversations with clients, etc. Is that accurate?
It is. It absolutely is. And what I'm going to take is one step further. You're exactly right. And I love John's thoughts on this as well, because it's very much complementary. Look, whether you're client facing, we're all commercial in some way. Our brands are our commercial to the outside world, whether you're a consultant, you're an entrepreneur, you're an executive, whatever, wherever you are in your career. And no matter where you're working, the fact of the matter is that experience expectations are changing. Our expectations of our companies, of the world around us are changing, but so are our clients' expectations of the experience they have, whether they're working with a Deloitte or a PwC or pick your large professional services firm. Those experience expectations are changing. And so to stay ahead of that, we ourselves are having to literally adapt, not just on the fly, but get ahead of that to try new things so that we can truly deliver on the promise of our respective brand values, the values and the purpose that we all want to deliver. So experience plays into this as well. And I guess I would re-impress upon our listeners, whether you're in a large organization or you're a small organization, or you're an entrepreneur, that experience of how you show up is as part and parcel of the brand that you're creating. And then how do you do that in the digital world is what obviously we're here to talk about. So hope that makes sense.
Nice. Yeah. And it's really, I think it's really useful to, for our community where there are going to be a lot of professional service providers from, not only corporate backgrounds, but also, freelance, agency, consultants, advisors, coaches, etc. So would you like to share a little bit about your framework and the story, the background of the framework about Aperture and giving and tribes and giving?
Yeah. So
and how does that apply to this?
Yeah, sure. So a bit of a loose framework for how I've been thinking about, this ethos of connection. First and foremost, it comes back, I think we've been talking about it for a little bit now, right, is opening our aperture. And what I mean by that is just thinking about not just the bigger picture for the problem that lives in front of us or what we've been presented with, but opening our aperture to the world around us. Looking at the world from different lenses. Look, we've got a lot of freelancers here who are very technical in their skill set. How do you think about your technical skill set, but also complement that with perhaps something that's non-technical? Maybe you're a designer, you're a designer, and that's what you do, and you build products. What are you doing in the world of philosophy? What are you doing in the world of reading? What are you doing in the world of writing, right? Marrying those two things together and opening our aperture to the world around us, I think not just makes us more interesting people, quite frankly, builds on our own desire to be lifelong learners and curious. But opening our aperture to the world around us, I truly believe if you think about that every single day in the spirit of connection and connecting ideas, not people in this case, will truly change the trajectory of how you think about your work and quite frankly, the people who are engaging with your work, right? So opening your aperture. The second thing is giving, right? There's never a bad time, but now especially is how do we think about and continue to live through a world of giving? I don't mean monetarily giving. Perhaps that's your thing. I'm talking about giving your time, giving your energy, sharing space with people around us, and albeit sharing virtual space, just like we're doing here. We need to do more of that. We need to do more of that. And not just because we're living through this world of the pandemic right now, as we talk about this today, but when we give, we get back 100,000 times over. And I say that, Alex, with the real intention is that we have to give, but expect nothing in return. And that's critical because I think many people think that it's a quid pro quo. I have to give something to get something. When you approach this from a mindset of giving time, energy, expertise, sharing thoughts like we're doing here, there's no expectation of anything in return here. But I hope this is of value to our community, the community that I'm now a part of and very much appreciate. At some point, somewhere, some way, somewhere down the line, the universe will provide. And I think we'll all be more connected in that capacity. So giving without expectation is number 2 from a pillar perspective. The third of which is around tribes. And I talk about tribes a lot. I said this in the very beginning. It's not just about connecting ideas and people, but it's like connecting tribes of people, tribes of the ideas that emanate from our tribes. We like to, associate and assimilate with people of like thinking. How do we find our tribes? Find your tribes if you don't have one. And that could be a community group. That could be people who are of like-minded technical skills. That could be, quite frankly, people who just want to talk about what they're doing outside of work. Whatever your tribe is, find your tribe. And then when you find that tribe, I challenge us, and maybe we'll challenge each other at the end of this, is to connect those tribes, right? I'm already thinking about how do I connect this biohacking community, which quite frankly, it's a word that I've heard of before, but I've never really immersed myself in. How does this tie back to my work in the enterprise? Because we don't talk about biohacking in the enterprise specifically. I'd love to connect our two tribes together. So join the tribe, build your tribe, connect the tribes. Open your aperture to the world around you. The world will truly change by doing so. And then finally, give without any expectation. And I think that will make you just a whole well-rounded person. But quite frankly, really allow you to become a true connector of people and ideas.
Yeah, and so that's the common thread across that framework is the concept of connection. So first of all, when you are opening the aperture, you're allowing yourself a wider view to connect ideas and see, back to Hegel, unseen opportunities, unseen challenges, perhaps. And then when you're connecting the tribes, you're talking about connection inside the tribe, connecting with your other tribal members and communities, but also then looking to reach out from your tribe into other tribes and connect that way. And then
absolutely,
And then another overriding theme is the concept of giving without expectation, and just trusting in the laws of cause and effect, or karma, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, this isn't like, I don't want to think this is like a woo-woo thing here, right? It's truly one of those things that, if we truly give without expectation and believe that, and just believe that, that will come back to you in many forms, of which you probably can't even put a handle on at this juncture. Exactly. That's
cool.
Right.
So that framework there. So what's the idea behind that framework? That's like a mental model for people to apply. Where did it come from?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things, like probably many of the thought leaders who are speaking on this summit. It's one of those things that I have kind of amassed over kind of my collection of years as an entrepreneur, as an advisor to large organizations. And I, like you, kind of pull on simple threads. I'd like to find, what is the commonality? Yes, I should not have to change my approach when it comes to working with an executive versus working as an entrepreneur or another entrepreneur. The commonality, I think we can all relate to these three pillars, no matter where you are working in the world, where you are physically or who you're working with. That's kind of where it was emanated from. I continue to adapt that framework in as much as I built on that a little bit, right? So if I can share with you, if I may, underpinning kind of those three kind of pillars, I believe there to be some other kind of underlying principles, if I may share with you in the audience here. Some of the things I think are really fundamental to the future of work. Yes, we can open our aperture. Yes, we should think about giving. Yes, we should be thinking about our tribes. When I think about what's required from not just a skills perspective, but just truly principles, I think there are 6 of them. And this is where I continue to adapt. First and foremost, I think this whole community lives from an ethos of curiosity. And you yourself are obviously a lifelong learner in the content you create. And how do we continue to infuse curiosity with our people, those around us, connection of tribes, help people be curious, instigate thought, instigate conversation, be curious. That's principle number 1. The second principle is around community orientation. That's what we're talking about today. Community orientation is the fundamental future of work when it comes to bringing people together. Third of which I don't think is any surprise to anybody, but it's about being adaptable. Adaptation, and you say this directly as you obviously we promote this summit, is how do we adapt in the new world? And I don't want to say new normal. It is just normal now. Adaptation is fundamental, and frankly, I think those who cannot adapt, they're going to have a very hard time, right? And I want to work with those people. I want to help them find their way to adapt and find their way into a tribe, or find a way to obviously adapt their skill set. So adaptation is the third one. The fourth one is around transparency. What I mean by that, Alex, is about how do we show up and actually as ourselves. And this comes back to something I'm very passionate about, which is, and I talked about Da Vinci from the beginning, is having empathy and listening, but also showing up and we've heard about radical candor, but showing up and being transparent with how you feel, what you're thinking. Don't let those emotions, bottle up inside, especially in the digital world we're all living in right now, right? So we're working virtually, we're having conference calls all day. This is like, stop the grind, but like, it's okay to be emotional. It's okay. Vulnerability is actually, quite frankly, I think one of the most underrated characteristics or skills that are going to be required to truly thrive in the world we're living in, right? Relationships. You said it yourself. We're talking about it for the past 40 minutes, is connection and relationships. So the fifth principle is around relationships. The sixth is finally purpose. How do we underpin everything we're talking about here with purpose? If your purpose is to, PwC, our purpose is really around building trust in society and solving important problems. That's what we do. How do you tie your personal purpose with something that maybe your business is leading, or that the organization that you're working for is leading? Tying your personal purpose to your work purpose, I think, will go a long way in integrating your work in your life and, quite frankly, thriving in the new world.
Nice. And those are all concepts that have been explored with various speakers. We had Chris Shipley, who was a thought leader on adaptation. She wrote the book, The Adaptation Advantage. It came out like last month, and she's been thinking about adaptation, agility, all these kinds of things. A lot of people are talking about purpose through the different, lenses to that concept, starting with why, finding your North Star, massive transformative purpose, MTP, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's good to have them kind of summarized and reinforced. Now, give us a little bit of a, because you mentioned the word polymath, and that's a great way to describe yourself. And I'm sure that you get frustrated when someone asks you the question, what do you do? What are your thoughts about that, dinner party, cocktail party question?
What? Yeah, it's the go-to, right? It's the no matter where you are, oh, what do you do? I don't know. I hope I share that. Hate's a very strong word. I strongly dislike that question because it's so inauthentic, right?
But you have to answer it, don't you? You have to answer it.
So I'm not going to dodge your question. So what do you do? Yeah. So look, I definitely I'm more of a self-described polymath, and people would probably say Larry does many different things. He does them all very well, but he does lots of different things. And so frankly, I think the way that I answer that question somewhat whimsically is like, it depends on the conversation we're having. Because if I'm at a cocktail party with a bunch of entrepreneurs, what do you do? I'm a startup founder and also an advisor and mentor to many startup companies. That's what I do in this context. Yeah. If I'm in an executive roundtable talking with a bunch of CIOs, what do you do? I happen to be an entrepreneur, but I actually happen to work with Fortune 1000 CIOs and help them define their digital strategies. Yeah. So a bit of a roundabout answer is I do many things. And I know just as our audience does many things, I would encourage us not to put yourself in a box. I don't put myself in a box. And quite frankly, my titles, I don't care about them. My company does not define me. What I would say is I'm a bit of a chameleon, right? And so what I do is whatever, not so much whatever I need to do for the context of that meeting or that conversation, but I feel comfortable in adapting, truly adapting on the fly in the context of the conversation.
Adaptation for the people at work. That's exactly adaptation at work. But like, I also like the getting a bit cheeky sometimes, with like a pattern interrupt. What do you do? I do well.
Yeah, I do well. I do well. How about you? Right. It's like, what do you want me to be today? No, in all seriousness, right? I mean, that's the truth.
What do you prefer though? Which questions do you prefer? And what do you ask?
So it's like, what do I ask? What are you working on right now? Not so much what do you do? What are you working on right now? What's a cool project that you're currently working on? Because quite frankly, that cool project, that cool thing could, quite frankly, someone's never asked me that. Hey, I'm working on building a community. I'm working on this really cool product in my basement, in my garage. That's not what you do. That's something you're working on, something you're passionate about. I don't like the question of like, oh, what's your superpower? That could be somewhat awkward if someone just asked you that out of the gate. I think it's cool. It's whimsical. It's
trendy.
Fun.
It's trendy. Needs a bit of work.
It's trendy. Don't go with the trend. I like to ask the question. It's a bit deeper. What are you working on right now? Is there someone else, maybe if we're in a networking context, hey, is there anybody, I'm Larry, it's really good to see you. Hey, I saw you were talking that, is there anybody else you think maybe I should talk to? Who have you met that's really interesting here? That goes down a level deeper than what do you do, but I get to tease out and you get to tease out of me, why are we even here together? And I'm talking about this in the context of like, maybe say a formal, gathering.
What's your why?
Frankly, what's your why? Yeah, that's also, I like that. I love the question, right? Simon Sinek, of course, why? Yeah. But when we do this in a very, I'm getting at the underpinning of all this stuff is how do we approach each other in a very authentic way versus the transaction, right? The transaction of what do you do? Here's my title. Here's what I work for. Here's what I do. I throw the ball to me. Then we're done. Like I got nothing. Like, cool. Tell me more. I could do that, but it becomes very transactional. Nowhere in this conversation have we, and it wasn't even engineered this way. The conversation you and I had even leading into this is you didn't really care what I did, but you had appreciation for I have a perspective and thought on this. And that's where we started. And now here we are having this conversation. So it's very authentic. It's relationship oriented, non-transactional. That's how I start those conversations. And it's been a lot of fun. It's a lot more fun to have that. And frankly, Alex, it becomes much more memorable. Everyone's asking what you do.
Always go deeper.
Always go deeper. Go beneath. Go ask the deep. Don't be ADD.
I'll tell you another one. One of my just wrapping up on that one, the what you do thing. One of my preferred ones. You can add it to your toolkit if you want to use it. What are your dreams? Tell me about your dreams for life. That's a as deep as depth charge, as deep as possible. Look, I think we've covered some really good ground. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Now, if I had to ask you, what is the most powerful idea from, like putting you on the spot, the most powerful idea that you'd want to share with our audience? We might take this out as a sound bite on the social media. What would that be?
Yeah, so I'm gonna encompass this from a working remotely, from a teaming, from a personal branding perspective, and I think it boils down to, yes, it's connection. I'm gonna challenge us to think about not time management, think about energy management. And what I mean by that is we can watch a clock, but it's gonna keep ticking. It's gonna keep going around or ticking away on our watches. When we move away from time management and really shift towards energy, we have more control. And I mean by control is that can be control of ourselves, our centering of ourselves, but frankly, we can then begin to integrate work and life. When we think about energy management versus time management, we can really, I believe, change the way that we work, change the way that we live, and quite frankly, have a direct impact on the people who we work for and who we work with, and quite frankly, make the world a better place.
Beautiful. Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing with us. Thank you for the time. We look forward to the tribal connection. I'm going to hold you to that. Thank you so much. And until next time.
Take care, my friend. Be well.